There's a famous quote, "Why do you want to fit inside a glass slipper when you can shatter the glass ceiling?" In other words, don't try and chase that Cinderella story when you can carve out your own destiny. For decades, strong women have shattered glass ceilings. And you're about to meet remarkable women who fought to break into professions long dominated by men. I'm Mike Walter. Let's take it full frame.
Voices that refuse to be silenced.
They wanted to sexually objectify me, and by doing that, they would take away my power to have a voice about what I was doing. It was a fight about doing my job. I didn't imagine that this was going to be the way the coverage was going to play out.
It was tough because in the very beginning, when they don't know that I have a lot of temper, they always can think that they can go out so you can have sex with them and you can have a better position in the company, and that's not my way of living.
A revolution that sparked a new literary dawn.
1961 was very important because it was the literacy campaign. I could study at the level of a university because education was free in my country, under Fidel Castro.
The fight for truth and integrity in the world of Latin music.
When I was working with Fania Records, I got a problem with the owner. I wrote as a journalist that they don't rehearse very good and they don't sound good. So he get mad with me and he say, "Listen, I pay you, so you talk about my guys very good." And I said, "I'm a journalist, a real journalist, so I'm not take money."
No reporters, male or female, are allowed there.
Lessons from history shaping the voices of tomorrow.
It's my honor and pleasure to be able to go into the classrooms with young people and be able to tell them my story, but then relate it to their lives today. Because I think what happened to me in terms of how I was characterized by the media is still happening to women who come out to challenge, either through Me Too or through very visible lawsuits against patriarchal institutions.
Woman pioneers. Next.
Decades ago, Melissa Lutke fought to report from where women were not allowed to go, the locker room. Her landmark case challenged gender discrimination in sports journalism. Today, Lutke's story reminds us how far we've come and how far we still have to go. Here's my conversation with pioneering sports journalist, Melissa Lutke.
In the 1970s, being a woman in the press box wasn't just rare, it was revolutionary. Sports journalist Melissa Lutke didn't just cover baseball, she challenged the rules that kept women on the sidelines. Her landmark fight became history, and her book, Locker Room Talk, A Woman's Struggle to Get Inside, tells that story in her own words.
When they decided to come after me, they came after me with many of the same techniques we see today. They wanted to sexually objectify me, and by doing that, they would take away my power to have a voice about what I was doing, which was really, in my view, you're absolutely right. It was a fight about doing my job. And I now characterize myself, looking back, as exceedingly naive.
Right. Well,
I didn't imagine that this was going to be the way the coverage was going to play out. I said, okay, use my name as the lead plaintiff in this case when I was asked, thinking this was all about a young woman in the 1970s, like many other young women, trying to break into a field that was male-dominated, and I just wanted to do my job. Boy, was I naive. If you can call a locker room where you have 30 men who didn't have anything to do with the game walking around and talking to you,
and still maintain that that's a private situation. I don't buy that. It's a situation where they're a public figure at that point. They're not a private individual in their home.
Melissa Lutke became the lead plaintiff in a 1978 federal case that secured equal locker room access for women sports reporters. But the courtroom wasn't the only place she had to fight. The spotlight followed her everywhere, including a surreal moment at a Broadway play.
What I love about your book is that it's not just kind of the basic 15-minute interview. I mean, you really delve deep into what happened. One of the things that the takeaways from your book that I really liked is you go to this Broadway show and suddenly people were talking about you behind you and this case. I mean,
But you forget I'm with my parents,
exactly.
of all people.
And how surreal was that?
Yeah, it was very surreal because the complaint was filed with the court on December 29th, 1977. And that day, in preparation for that, the AP sent out over their wire. And for anyone who's young watching this means they pressed a button and it became digital. But it went out over their wire and it appeared in papers and all over the country, and it went to radio stations. So what I experienced that night is that my parents had driven down, gotten there a little late, and I'd bought tickets to go to the gin game with Jessica Tandy, and, you know, it was going to be fabulous. So we took our seats in the mezzanine a little early, and I was catching up on siblings. We had 5 in our family. We had a lot to talk about. And then there were 2 women seated behind us, and then all of a sudden we noticed that conversation was starting. It appeared that their 2 husbands were joining them. That's what I surmised. And very soon, one by one, my mother, myself, and my father all stopped talking. And the reason is because the women turned to their husbands and said, "You are never going to believe this. There's a woman, she's pretty young, there's a young woman who is going to be suing baseball so she can go in and see players naked." I thought, well, I guess they are talking about me, but this wouldn't be how I would characterize it. And my mother, I looked over at her. She was silent and sort of had this shock on her face. And I tried to remain cool because, of course, I had to be cool in front of my parents. But we just were silent and listening to this. So you're right. It was. And then, of course, the lights, flash, and it means the thing's going to start and the curtain, kind of begins to open and it all quiets again. But in my head, it's anything but quiet. I just am realizing that I have entered another zone, a zone that I wasn't at all prepared for.
Yeah, and I think also how your perspective was, I want access. I want to be able to do the job just like everybody else. And in order to actually do the job like everybody else, all the male sports writers, they're all in the locker room getting all these great quotes. If you're excluded from that, you're excluded from a big part of the story, right?
Well, I thought so. And evidently the judge agreed. We can go into the case a little more later. But, by then I had been assigned, after this incident in 1977 that opened up this case, added to my portfolio over the winter was that I was assigned as the reporter for the NBA beat, which meant I had to learn a whole new sport. But it also learned, because the NBA had given equal access to locker rooms in 1975, that I actually had the experience of going into locker rooms and interviewing athletes, and I was there alongside the men and realized it just worked. It worked. It worked for the players. It worked for me. Now, let me give you a sense of how it wouldn't work under Bowie Kuhn's idea. He claimed, which was a greenwashing, it wasn't the case, but he claimed that he had separate accommodations for women, and that the idea would be that the players would then be brought out of the clubhouse and individually brought out to this separate accommodation. In 2 years of baseball, I was never offered a separate accommodation. But even if I had been, 1954, the Supreme Court ruled unanimously in Brown versus Board of Education, landmark case, that separate is not equal in discrimination that is protected under the 14th Amendment. In that case, it was racial justice. Here we're talking about gender discrimination. So here's a lawyer, trained, University of Virginia. He'd been practicing law for nearly 20 years to then, and he didn't seem to recognize that there was some connection between separate cannot be equal and our request for equal access, which meant I had to be with the players at the same time and in the same place that the male reporters were. No one was telling Bowie Kuhn, not the judge, she couldn't do that it had to be in the clubhouse. It was up to him to decide. The only requisite that we were asking is it had to be equal.
Here's the thing I want to ask about that, though. You know, because you've been around baseball for a while, that it's misogynist and it's the old boys club. And these sports writers, they call you girl and they kind of demeaning and stuff. But this is Jane Pauley. It's a woman, and she came after you.
Oh, God, she came after me. And I surmise in the book, I cannot be inside her head. I've never interviewed her about it. But she was kind of a rookie as well at that point. She just really started. And people remember her as coming from the Midwest. And they remember her as Midwest nice. She was living up to sort of the reputation I think she felt she had to hold her place in the minds of the viewers. If she were to suddenly be viewed by the mass of Americans at that point as being a, quote, women's liber, taking the side of this extreme case, what was becoming a wedge issue, we know what that is now politically. If she were to be seen as taking that side, I think she felt that that wasn't where she wanted to be. So what she basically did, to go back to this separate accommodations, I'm trying to answer a question about just the chaos after the sixth game when they did give me a runner who was supposed to go in and get the athletes and bring them out for me. Didn't work. It was like crash and burn. It didn't work at all. The athletes wouldn't come out. It just didn't work. We had a little pilot test. It didn't work. But Jane Pauley so wanted to believe when the commissioner said that he had separate accommodations for me that I was all taken care of. That there should be no suit about this. He's taking care of you. And she interrupts me to make that point when I'm talking about this chaos. And I reminded her, I said, no. I'm squished against a concrete wall. The fans have come in through the dugout tunnel. They are screaming. I said, had my male escort been able to deliver me a player who had actually played in the game, which he never did, I would not have been able to have him hear a question I was asking, nor would I have heard his answer. So anyway, but she interrupted me, and then even more at the end of it, she took from a very nervous me before the show when I was trying to kind of do a little lighthearted joking with her about a big picture of Reggie Jackson behind us in the clubhouse that night with his big barrel chest because the photographer had sort of taken the picture below. So, in just trying to chat with her, which she wasn't very chatty, but she evidently took notes, and then she made up this question at the end to really embarrass me. And that was, when you arrived out here and you looked up at that picture, you turned to me and said, "Is that Reggie Jackson's chest? So why aren't we to assume that after all, you only want to be in that clubhouse to look at men's bodies? I'm on live TV. And this is a player who I would drive up to the stadium with him in his Rolls Royce so that I could interview him because I could not get in the clubhouse. For anyone who thinks I could have spent 2 years covering the Yankees and not know Reggie Jackson. So, but she blindsided me, and it took a while for me to kind of compose myself. And in the end, I managed a relatively decent answer, but I walked out of there with one major lesson. And that's the moment I realized I was different. I was a different person now. I couldn't do banter with people. I couldn't take at my eyes or my gut level a sense that I could trust this person. I couldn't be natural. I had to always be on guard with what I said, lest it be taken and used against me.
I'll just read one little section from your book. When the onslaught started, I realized right away how little control I had over how all of this would unfurl. I also didn't know where to turn for solace, so I internalized the emotional pain. This in part contributed to my hasty, ill-advised decision to marry a man whom I barely knew and whom my friends and family wanted me not to wed. To me, I saw becoming a wife as the safe harbor I needed to have as this media storm raged. That really hit me when I read that.
It gets me to write it again.
Yeah, well,
relive it.
I know, because there were decisions you made about your personal life based on this case.
Very bad decisions. The marriage ended in divorce several years later. But the decision, let me try to explain it. I mean, I guess the best metaphor I can do as a sailor is to talk about when you're out in a storm, you want to find a safe harbor. And this man kind of jumped into my life in January, just after the suit had been filed. And he seemed to offer that. And then with his precipitous proposal and my precipitous agreement to marry him 3 weeks after I met him, that's 3 dates after I knew him, was really trying to back off of being this somewhat attractive, slender, blonde-haired, single woman, which I thought had a lot to do with the way I was being characterized and targeted. And we have to put ourselves back in the 70s. I mean, there was a lot of debate then about, who these single liber women were, what they were about. And married women were still thought to sort of be part of the old tradition. And so there was a part of and I don't want to even call it thinking, because I don't think it was thinking, but emotional response, that when he proposed, I saw it as a safe harbor. But what I didn't realize until I really wrote this book is how much considering him to be a safe harbor and error in judgment pushed away the people who actually were my safe harbor, which was my network of really close female friends. Because we really no longer could have a truthful relationship because they wanted me to just back out of my decision to marry this man. They didn't like him. They said it was the wrong thing. And stubbornly, I held to it. I want to put an addendum on this because I was actually proved right in some odd way. Not about the decision to get married, but about the characterization of me as a married woman. Because on the day after the court decision came down, Mike Lupica, who was one of the leading columnists in New York, came over to interview me the day the decision came down, and he wrote a column that appeared on the back page of the tabloid. And not only did he use my married name, which I really never used, but he basically set it up in a way of saying, Mrs. Lincoln, that was my husband's name, Mrs. Lincoln has decided not to go to the ball game tonight and to stay home and make dinner for her husband. I was not all wrong. You see, I don't mean to say this critically, but men can be somewhat swayed pretty easily by the surroundings that a woman finds herself in terms of how they want to characterize who she is. Well, when the men went away to fight war, the women got to play. But look what they had to play in. They played in skirts. They had to do makeup classes, etiquette classes. When they slid into second base, you can see why the men filled the stands. Okay, so the men come home from war, the women go off the baseball field, and it's about the 70s when I show up.
Decades later, Melissa Ludke's voice still echoes in newsrooms. She mentors young women, speaks out about setbacks in gender equality, and reminds us that the fight isn't over.
You basically broke the doors open of the old days, and now it seems like the doors are closing back to the old days.
I could agree with you on that.
What's that like for you? I mean, to think, I went charging through, I made these steps towards progress, and now you're seeing.
Well, one of the things I can do is just keep talking. about those days and why the 14th Amendment is such a protective vehicle that we need to learn how to use again. We need to learn about it. We need to learn to rely on it. We need to learn to have lawyers who can argue cases based on it. It's going to be an invaluable amendment for the time ahead. So one of the things this book, and you're right, I did steal the first part of it, the main title, Locker Room Talk. When he said it, I realized that was the title. But then I bought it back for myself with the subtitle, A Woman's Struggle to Get Inside. But I meet one reason with this book gives me access to a lot of classrooms. I was just out at Indiana University. I do Zooms constantly into classrooms. I'm able to speak with people of the younger generation. For example, when I joked last night, when I tell them about meeting Frank Gifford, who helped me get into my career, I have to say to them, remember, he's Kathy Lee's husband. But, with my crowd last night, which was more gray-haired and white-haired like me, they knew, Frank Gifford from Monday Night Football and the rest. So I have to adapt it a little, but it's my honor and pleasure to be able to go into the classrooms with young people and be able to tell them my story, but then relate it to their lives today. Because I think they understand very quickly that what happened to me in terms of how I was characterized by the media is still happening to women who come out to challenge, either through Me Too or through very visible lawsuits against patriarchal institutions. It still happens to them. The sexual objectification, the way that this woman is treated, Christine Blaney Ford, we watched her, she had to literally move because of the threats against her. So they see this on their social media. Women who cover sports see the threats on their social media. So we're in a different and a really scary and frightening place. But this book gives me a vehicle to be a part of talking to younger people about it.
It's a great book and a great
Thank
conversation. Always a delight to see you. Thank you so much.
So good to see you. I don't know. I hope we do this again. I don't know how, but it's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome back. Spanish language literature in Cuba dates back to the colonial era. But few voices have captured the island spirit like Nancy Morejon. Her poetry reflects Cuba's soul, its culture, struggles, and strength.
My father was very worried about my future because he was a poor man. He couldn't afford getting me into a university because at that time, university, you have to pay around 100 pesos that he did not have.
Nancy Morejon comes from a working-class family in Havana, Cuba. Her father worked at the docks, and her mother was a seamstress. From a young age, they instilled in her a value of education and an awareness of social class divides.
In 59 was the emergency of the revolution.
Y de todos será la victoria. Patria o muerte, venceremos.
Then 1960 and 1961 was very important because there was the literacy campaign. I took part in it. I finished my senior high school. In 62, I was getting in the university. I was allowed to know because it was free. My father was released of paying 100 pesos. It seems very, very simple. It is not. It's my truth. And I'm telling it to you. I could be a professional. I could study at the level of a university because of that. Because education was free in my country under Fidel Castro.
Despite her humble beginnings, Nancy rose to become a key voice in global literature. During a visit to Washington, D.C., she shared one of her most powerful poems, Mujer Negra, or Black Woman.
It is concrete in terms of race, in terms of gender. It's very graphic.
Todavía huelo la espuma del mar que me hicieron atravesar. La noche no puedo recordarla, ni el mismo océano podría recordarla. Pero no olvido el primer alcatraz que divisé. Altas las nubes como inocentes testigos presenciales. ¿Acaso no he olvidado ni mi costa perdida, ni mi lengua ancestral?
Her poetry is highly regarded as it reflects and explores Cuba's culture, its struggles, and resilience.
I think that creative writing is irrational. There are things that you know, and there are things that you don't. And it's the healthier. Because if you program everything, if you plan everything, there is something which is not going to work. So I did not have the pretension to everlast with that poem. But the poem by itself is everlasting.
Me dejaron aquí y aquí he vivido. Y porque trabajé como una bestia, aquí volví a nacer. Su merced me compró en una plaza, bordé la casaca de su merced y un hijo macho le parí. Mi hijo no tuvo nombre. Y su merced murió a manos de un impecable lord inglés.
It's bitter. A reader can think about that woman was pregnant by that specific lord and her son had no name. Can you imagine that? It's a very specific fact through which we explain our identity. And it is a diverse identity. Not only for Cuba, but for many other Caribbean islands, specifically to the Hispanic Caribbean. So it is sad there is an anguish in that woman being aware that she's alone, that she has been abandoned. There is the birth of a literature or a creative writing that comes from the back of mothers. A good experience, a bad experience, there's always the history of your mother. And this is so important to our times in which gender is a factor you cannot erase. And that's the contribution, I think, of that poem. Is the whole experience of the passage, the crossing, slavery, and colonial times that still endure and still hits our history.
De días de sol y guerra de rapiña.
You have to admit that writing poetry is a job, is a work, which includes to contemplate that sightseeing. That's my job, to look at that, to look at the light, and to reflect it in a poem. Oh, I do trust in that. And although I believe in inspiration, it's like a mixture, you know. You write, you are inspired, you write a little bit, and then you put that paper in a drawer. You leave it 24 hours, 24 days, and then you come back, you take it out, and then you rewrite. Because words, you know, are like toys, and you go here and there and you move them. And finally, you got your goal or not. Sometimes you don't, but that's the only way. You have to work, you have to reflect. That's very important. And you have to love words, because words are the tools you have for expressing yourself.
Female writers have long been fighting for a place in music journalism. They are still underrepresented in a field dominated by men. Carmen Mirabal is a pioneer. She's the first woman to write about Latin music. She later went on to found Salsa magazine. I sat down with Carmen to talk about breaking barriers.
Carmen Mirabal is a seasoned professional in the communications industry with expertise spanning journalism and literature. She began writing at just 14 years old and quickly established herself as a pioneer. In the 1970s, she became the first woman to write about music, especially salsa, during a time when the field was overwhelmingly dominated by men.
The interesting thing is that your journalism career started at a very young age, like 14, right? Can you talk to me
Yes.
about entering the world of writing?
My father was a postal supervisor, so he took all the magazines that people drop off when they move. They need to sew it or throw it away. So he take it to me and I read it all in English, Spanish, and everything. So I said, listen, I want to write. And I remember something like this, my father buy me, an Olivetti, I think that was. And he read it to me and he make a postal for me so people can write me there. So I have my own fans. So I have about 10, 11 years. I start sending communications to all the newspapers. So when I have 14, was a big space in a newspaper named El Imparcial. And they roll me to my postal and they say, we have a position for you if you want to come. So I only have 14, so I need to go with my father. So my father bring me and the guy says, oh my God, how old are you? And I say, 14. But you have 2-3 years writing for us. Yeah, but you don't pay me. So you never ask my age. And then he says, but now I'm going to pay you. And they say, well, it's okay. My father can sign. My father signed and I started working with the newspaper at 14 formally.
As she ventured into the male-dominated world of Latin music, Carmen worked alongside legends like Tito Puente and Celia Cruz, becoming the first woman to cover salsa in the 1970s. But her journey wasn't without challenges. Facing gender and racial barriers, Carmen stood firm, letting her resilience and creativity lead the way.
You have a magazine about salsa early on before others.
When I was working with Fana Records, I got a problem with the owner because he always wants to do the things at the way that he wants to, and I have my own character. So one day, he sent me to a Fana All-Stars that was with a Gran Combo of Puerto Rico, and I wrote as a journalist that they don't rehearse very good and they don't sound good. That Gran Combo was better. So he get mad with me and he say, listen, I pay you, so you talk about my guy is very good. And I said, wait, you pay me as a public relations. You don't pay me as a journalist. And then he get mad and he take a lot of money, put it in my desk and says, everybody has a price. Which is yours? He said, which is mine? Are you crazy? I'm a journalist, a real journalist. So I'm not take money. Okay, you're fired. No, before you fire me, I'm quitting. So I left. And then when I walked downstairs from Fania building, was a telephone of 10 cents in those times. So I pick up the phone and I call Joe Kane, that he was the general manager of Tico Alegre, that was the competition of Fania. And I say, listen, do you really think that I can have a job? Doing what? The same that I was doing Fania. Now, where are you? So I take a cab. And when I was there, I got a welcome. You know, was Tito Puente, Ismael Rivera, and Charlie Palmieri that were part of the company. They were so glad that I go to the company, I meet the owner, and I will start working in the afternoon.
And you work with some pretty big stars. I mean, some of the industry leaders. Can you describe what that was like?
It was very good because at the first day that I arrived to Fania, after he hired me, Jerry Masucci, Johnny Pacheco, that was the vice president, told me, listen, you're Latin, you're a woman, you're beautiful, so these guys, you know, are very hard to work with. How are you going to do it? I said, well, I'm going to be the pen pal. I'm not coming here to be going out with any leader or any singer. I come here to work. And I said, that's the attitude. So I never had a problem, even that I was a woman.
But being a woman, you had to deal with gender issues at a very, I mean, this is many, many years ago. I mean, it was not.
It's 50 years ago.
It was tough. It was tough, wasn't it? I mean, it was tough.
Was tough.
Describe it.
Well, it was tough because in the very beginning, when they don't know that I have a lot of temper, they always can think that they can go out so you can have sex with them and you can have a better position in the company. And that's not my way of living. So I always says, listen, I never go out with musicians. I never go out with owners, with nobody in the business. If you are dealing with that, we make business. If not, it's always another place that I can go. I always do it like that.
Yeah. But I think one of the things that's interesting is you know, when you think about a young woman like you trying to go into a business dominated by men, and then, you know, like, it's not just gender inequality. I mean, there's racism involved as well. I mean, you're dealing with a lot of different layers. What is it inside of you that makes you so strong that 50 years later we can be sitting here having this conversation, that it didn't break you along the way?
My father was always after me like my grandfather. My grandfather was a guy from a place in Puerto Rico, and he had a big place to do a tobacco and coffee and all of that. And he hired me because I know how to do the tobacco, and I say that ladies talk too much, and was in the radio and watching soap operas, and they make 25 tobaccos in 1 hour, so I can marry 35. So I said to my grandfather, okay, how much do you pay? He said, $1, 10 hours. Okay, I want the $1, the same than them, and then I want to be the supervisor. So people that are losing time, I'm going to take them out. If I do with my little hands of 10 years, I can do 35, they can do 35. If not, it's another people to hire. And I say, I like that. But I always was like that, you know, because I watch other people. I grew up with other people, and you take their defects or their effects. So I always have a lot of temper since I was a child.
But can I ask you, I mean, as a teenager, I think it's very easy to be starstruck by some of the big names you've just mentioned, where you would just enter the room and be like in awe. But you had a job to do, and somehow you were able to check that, where you weren't starstruck. You would go about doing your. What do you think it was about you, or were there episodes where you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm sitting right across from this huge star? I mean, did you go through some of that?
Well, I think that was emotional, but I see it as a job. I remember when Queen was in Madison Square Garden, one of the guys, Larry Hallow, have a friend of a friend, and they bring us tickets and we saw Queen in New York, very close to, And after that, we went backstage. We met the guys, and other people will be screaming or super emotional. For me, it was normal because people from Fanny at those times were very, very famous. So no difference between being from England or from being from New York because, uh, you know, when Larry Hallow goes to Madison Square Garden, have the same amount of people that the other guys. So I never get, that emotion. My first emotion, I'm going to tell you one was, I had a friend, I was living in Los Angeles, and he called me, listen, Linda Carter, Wonder Woman, is looking for a producer. And she doesn't know Spanish, even that her family is Mexican. And she want to do by Phonetica an album. Are you aware? Yes. For me, that was the first time in my life that I feel very emotional because when I was a child, I saw her program on TV. And I always do too many things that people say, she want to be like a Wonder Woman. And then meet her was very important for me because she was like my image of what a woman need to be, very, how to say, very helpful, take care of other people. So work with her, I think that was very nice for me because she was a wonderful woman, very expressful, very warming, and her husband too, Robert Almond. And also I got another dream to come true when I have 10, 11 years. Paul Anka went to Puerto Rico to a place named Caribe Hilton. And I was a child as my birthday, my father take me to see Paul Anka and put your hair on my shoulder, Diana. Oh my God. And when another producer called me and said, Paul Anka want to sing Spanish, his best songs with the lyrics in Spanish of your artist. I was managing an Argentinian very famous artist named Luis Angel, and he make all the songs in Spanish. Oh my God, and work with Paul was something. First, that he have a lot of a love. He love people. He's very simple, a very nice guy, very professional. Was incredible. I said, Paul is said, lo que son las cosas. And I said, lo que son las cosas. No, it's not like that. Oh my God, was something beautiful. And Luis Angel, he was the writer of all the songs, was there. And I think that was very emotional for us.
In her latest works, Carmen Mirabal continues to push boundaries and spark reflection. Books like The Lie of the American Dream and The Myth of the American Dream challenge romanticized narratives of success, exposing the exploitation and disillusionment faced by immigrants.
Listening to you and your story, it's what a lot of people would say is the American dream. And yet we started by talking about how I can't believe you're talking to me because you could be writing another book. You've written about 35 of them. One is The Lie of the American Dream, The Myth of the American Dream. You write about these things.
Well, I write The Lie of American Dream.
Yeah. So can you talk about kind of the mythology about the American Dream and the lie of the American Dream?
Well, the thing is, when you think in American Dream, for me was American Dream because I'm American. Puerto Ricans are Americans. Also, I study. I finished my PhD. I have a lot of opportunity because of my education. But when you think in the American Dream, you're talking about some people from South America that wants to cross the border, and they pay to someone, some monies to do that, but they don't have any knowledge, they don't have education, and they don't have opportunities if they don't have that. So what they're gonna do? They're gonna be housekeepers. They're gonna be working in the farms. It's not the same American Dream. But in those times, in the years that I was living in Los Angeles, that was 80s, 90s, was easy to cross the border and found a job. But after that, it's not like that. Why? Because it's a lot of people that make money with your dreams. You pay to a coyote $8,000 to cross the border, but that doesn't mean that you're going to cross it. Because if you're a beautiful woman and you have a beautiful face and body, they're going to sold you. That's my story. So my story is not against the president. My story is to tell to those Latin Americans, could be it's better to have a torta in Mexico or or some of your food in here in your country that go to cross the street and go there Tijuana to San Diego, that is only one street, and somebody you never go on. Why? Because men are working for the narco traffics. Okay, they put them to work in farms, and the ladies, they're prostitutes. My story is a story that when I was a journalist, I worked for an important channel in Los Angeles, and I was a few days with my cameraman with no documents to see what's going on there. And the only thing that I saw when I was living with those ladies is 50, 60 ladies in the floor, with 18 hours of doing hard labor work. But when they are beautiful, they sold them, as slaves, as drug or sex trafficking. And that was at the end of the 90s. Now it's worse. I have those stories, and when I returned to the channel, the person that was in charge, he said, "Oh, that's not important. This is against the police. This is against life." And he put the 3/4 video that was in those times 3/4, and he put it in days. And I said, "Listen, I have a child of 3 years. I risked my life being undocumented, and now you erase a story. I have ladies that were violated, sodomized, and you're telling me that is not a good story. That's a human being." And I said, "No, it's not important for the channel." So what happened when I moved to live in Argentina and lay in Dominican Republic, and now that I live in Colombia, I say people getting desperate to make $5,000 or $8,000 to pay for a coyote, but they don't know that they're gonna cross the border, because I know very bad stories that people that are living in Singapore as prostitutes. I have a friend that she paid $10,000 for her daughter that she has 17 years, and she never saw her. She's in Singapore. Takes her 15 years to find her. And that's the stories that I told to people. Be careful if you cross the street. Other people, when they are not beauty or they are not young, they kill them and sold their parts. Okay? So it's a lot of people that doing business with your life. I know a lot of people that never returned from United States. So it's not it's a big problem that people still thinking that the American dream is there. No. I spoke to a Colombian guy from Bogota the other day. He says, "No, I'm going there, and I'm going to San Andres, and then I go there, and I go there, blah, 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 $10,000, and I'm going to be making $25 the hour." You nuts? I have a PhD, and the university pay me $40 the hour. What are you talking about? How are you going to make with no education $25? No, because I have a friend that he told me that I can work in a farm. Are you crazy? For working a farm, they pay you $1, $2, and you live with 50 guys in a floor. Okay, and the shower that you're gonna take is 2 times at the week with a hose like the one that you use in the jails. What are you talking about? And say, no, you are crazy. Okay, I'm crazy. What do you think? I have my Social Security. I have a few properties, and I live more comfortable in Bogota, because when you change dollar for pesos, you have a better quality of life. That's my dream now. So what are you talking about? You're going to my country, you're going to the United States to do what? You have fifth grade. What do you think that you can do in the United States? No Spanish, because it's not good Spanish. You have no good English. And why are you going to wait to make $25 the hour with fifth grade? And sometimes people insult your intelligence because they want to know more about you see of the things you see every day. You know, I hate when people tell me, no, I'm going back to the American dream and I'm going to marry somebody that make me the papers. That's a stupid thing.
Let me ask one final question. When I listen to your stories, you start out at a very young age, reporter, journalist, writing, and then you segue into doing public relations. You're involved in the record industry, producer. I mean, it just seems like the keys in your life, resilience, this capacity to reinvent yourself. How would you describe yourself?
As a person, as you just said, I always see. I can see I can see tomorrow and then say, okay, the record business is going down, so I need to reinvent myself. So I move to other side. So when I have my own factory of doing 45 LP cassettes and CDs. One day, a guy called me that he wanna buy it, and I say it's not in sale. And I say, okay, you're gonna remember this day. 3 days after that, that guy put my manufacturing company on fire. So I need to start all over. And then I says, well, after all the record business is a little bit gone down, so let me see what I'm gonna do now. And I move, and I still moving. When I see that I was writing and Borders get broke, Barnes and Noble went in bankruptcy, and I say, oh my God, there's no distribution companies for the books. So I make my own company. I do sinpapelissintinta.com. That means no paper, no, how you say tinta in English? Think. How you say? Ink. No ink. It's no paper, no ink. And then I do a virtual. So I have my own company, my own library in virtual, and I have my 35 books and other people's books. So why? Because I saw that it's very difficult to publish. A book like this, 625 25 pages, is expensive by the paper. But then you need to give the 45% or 50% to a distribution company. And then they say, oh my God, 4 years writing this book to make how much of money? How much I'm gonna do? So it's better to have it in no paper, no ink.com in Spanish. And then you can buy it less. Why? Because it's easier to carry. This is a big one, so you can carry it in your tablet, you can carry it in your smartphone, and I reinvented myself. And then I was here in Bogota, and a friend told me, you got good stories. Why you don't make a movie? So I do 2 scripts, and I'm negotiating to make movies on my book. So you always need to look what is going on because, getting old and everybody's going down there, that's the only thing that you have sure. Be old and get and go to death. So you need to reinvent yourself to don't be in backwards.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For more episodes, go to cgtnnow.com.
That's this edition of Full Frame. Our thanks to Melissa Lutke and Carmen Mirabal for their perspectives on women in journalism. If you know other visionaries you'd like to see on our show, email us at fullframe@cgtnamerica.com. And from all of us here on Full Frame, thanks so much for watching.